I'm just waiting for Christina to show up, but we are going live. It's our first live that we are hosting in 2023. Let's see here. Christina, where you at? Oh, there you go. All right, come on up, Christina. Let's see. Christina, where you at?
I actually signed on.
There you go. What's up? All right, let's see here. Are you excited about our first
Not
IG
excited,
Live
but
of
more
2023?
terrified. But then I just need to remember that this is like our podcast talks and our daily admin talks when we would talk to each other in the morning before we started first period. So I need to have that mindset.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, more than anything, it's just another way for us to talk about these topics in a different forum. And it's just like you said, conversations that we normally have. So let's get started. As people jump in, they'll just catch us where we're at. I'll do a quick introduction. I am Elin, Dr. Cervantes. I'm half of Elin and Christina. I am a former school counselor, former administrator, and now a school leader coach,
Yes.
specifically
And
here in the
I'm
Bay Area of
Christina
California.
Macalino, or
You want to
Dr.
introduce yourself,
Macalino,
Christina?
and I was a former English teacher, former school site administrator, elementary school, middle school, high school level. And now I am a teacher coach here in the Bay Area alongside as a school leader coach with my homie here, Elin. So yeah, and so we started a business together in addition to this podcast. And so here we are. Just want to share our thoughts, our 2 cents and things.
Yeah, so I think, with anything, it's good to clear up the objectives. Like, what are we trying to address? And any of the conversations we have, and with this one, being an equity-driven leader is not a buzzword. Really, what we're trying to do or talk about in this IG Live is to define equity. Really, what is equity? And to clarify or discuss and pack the misconceptions of equity and like what it means to be an equity-driven school leader. Again, like thinking about it, it's not just a buzzword. So for me, like we often hear the word equity thrown around in the education field more and more. We are seeing DEI trainings and diversity statements listed within different school districts, and we feel some type of way about it, right? We have been educators for over 15 years, and both of us became educators because we specifically wanted to address the system and improve it for our Black and Brown students. So we've been participants in DEI workshops and discussions. We have read those diversity statements and, listened to the school board meetings and all that's been talked about, especially here in the Bay Area, but across the nation. And we currently work with school leaders in different districts here in the Bay Area, and so we've been hearing it in different ways from them as well. So there was, we're going to talk about a few articles, but there was an article in EdWeek called 10 Buzzwords Educators Never Want to Hear Again. And although equity wasn't one of the top 10, it did show up in the word cloud. And, that makes us like wonder and think about, well, what is it that we can talk about? What is it not annoying? And so the first one, let's talk about it. When we think about buzzword, the way to define buzzword is a word or phrase, often an item of jargon. It's fashionable in a particular time or in a particular context, like a trend. So that's where equity again is not a buzzword because it's not a trend. It's not something that is here now and gone tomorrow. Like it's here to stay.
Well,
So I don't know.
before I add in
What
my
do you
two
think, Christina?
cents, I
Or what
just
do you
want
want
to
to add
say
to
hi
that?
to Carolyn. Thank you for your support and tuning in. She she's a fellow coach as well, not in education,
Hey,
but
Carolyn.
like in the whole business financial world. So thank you. Much love to you, C. So um, I, just like what Aline said, like we came across this article on Ed Week and it just really made me feel some type of way. Like I was like, wait, what? Like how the heck is equity in this part of this? Even though it's not on the top 10 list, it made it to the word cloud, and it's a big, it's the word was big, so that means like in a word cloud, that the bigger the word is, that means the more it was voted on. So so I was like, yeah, we have to talk about this and just unpack it and just explain why, from our point of view, of why this is equity should not be considered a buzzword, why it's not a fashionable word and jargon that is just going to go away. Like I hope and pray that it does not go away. So when I saw that article, it made me think of a past admin experience that I had. So I'm not going to call out the particular school or district that I was at, but at that time, I was in charge of creating a staff supervision schedule. And so a staff member asked to meet with me after school because she said that one of my decisions was inequitable. So you know what I'm saying? Like I'm trying to like beat the traffic. It was already like 4 o'clock. And I was like, usually I'm just like, I'll just, if it's not like an emergency, I could wait, wait till tomorrow. But if someone's going to say that one of my leadership decisions was inequitable, I was like, yeah, let me put my purse back down and yeah, let me talk to this staff member right quick. So I met up with this staff member, um, and I was like, I was kind of walking back and forth. I was like, okay, because I feel like this type of conversation, especially when we talk about equity, it's not like a one and done 2 to 3 sentences. It's going to be a conversation. It's going to take time. So I was like, wait, let me just see if I should just stay back and let me just respond first via email to just say like, oh, can I get more, which is a practice that I do before I respond to someone in a full-on meeting. I always try to reach out in an email to just say like, hey, like, just so that we could be mindful of each other's time, could you drop some facts, or not facts, but some information, so that way I could do my research and come prepared to the meeting. But I couldn't help it. I mean, that really touched a sore spot for me when when the email said that I made an inequitable decision. So yeah, I ended up staying. I met with the staff member, and so basically, she said that according to the supervision schedule, she noticed that her grade level team had at least 4 more supervision time slots than everyone else. And so, I just wanted to make sure that I heard it correctly. Like, she was talking about, when I say supervision, y'all, I'm talking about recess. And so I was like, okay, so you're saying that I made an inequitable decision because my math distribution was off. And she said yes. So I had to breathe like 3 times, maybe even like bite my tongue. And for people who really know me, like they know that I have a really I don't have a poker face. Like if I look irritated, like you could see it in my face, you could see it in my body language, you could definitely hear it in my voice. And I know that's like an area of um an area of need that I know that I need to be more, I need to control that a little bit better. But in this case, I was like really pushing it. I was actually kind of proud of myself. So respectfully, I explained to her that this was definitely a recess duty, and in terms of math, is definitely not an equity issue. Because when we refer to equity in an educational setting, we are talking about addressing systemic racial disparities. So at that time, I think she was thinking more about equality versus equity. But real talk, even if we were talking about equality, once again, equality in an educational setting is referring to individuals having equal rights and opportunities so that they can make the most of their educational experience. So, like, saying that I violated her human rights when my math was off on recess duty, I was like, nah, like that's not the case. And so, look, I shared that experience because I think that the number one school leader no is assuming that everyone is in the know, or that all staff members are on the same page. And so this is an example of me and my admin team assuming that this staff member or staff in general, that they really know what equity, particularly equity in an educational setting, looks like, what it means and what it looks like. So I know that as school leaders, we are mindful about not wanting to offend anyone, especially returning or veteran teachers. However, when something affects the overall climate, school climate and culture, let's make no assumptions. We have to define it, describe it, chunk it, data support it, process it, just unpack the hell out of it, and make sure that everyone is on the same page. And by the way, unpack was one of the top 10 buzzwords. So, and we use that word all the time.
Well, all the time, because I think it's important, because it kind of breaks it down and saying, like, we can't just say something, because that's how it turns into a buzzword, is that we're just throwing it around and saying it. Like, we have to break it down or unpack it and revisit it often so that people understand and continue to be on the same page. Because we all know, I mean, especially like working in a school, we should know that you can't just say it once and the person is going to like totally take it in and register it, 100%. Remember and understand it forever. So we have to continue to revisit it.
Assumptions. We want to make sure that we define the words that we are using and unpacking today, just to make sure that we are on the same page and you know which definitions that we are working off of. So I am going to first define educational equity, and it's specifically, my favorite definition is from the Glenn E. Singleton book, Courageous Conversations About Race. Y'all definitely need to cop this and or register in one of their professional development series. It's like an absolute essential. So according to Glenn E. Singleton, educational equity. Equity is not a program or initiative and does not equate to, quote, doing diversity work, end quote. Equity is a belief, a habit of mind that does not correspond to the beginning or end of the day. Achieving true equity for all students must be a moral imperative, and it serves as a central and essential component of any attempt to eliminate racial achievement disparities. Okay. Then another word that we are using is what it means to, what an equitable school or equitable school system is. So this one is from a book that I pretty much reference almost every single day. especially since I work at a K-12 school district. The Art of Coaching, Elena Aguilar. Okay, so what's an equitable school or equitable school system? An equitable education system is one in which student achievement and learning are not predictable by race, class, language, gender, sexual orientation, or other social factors. An equitable school system will be in which African American and Latino males do not constitute the largest groups of students who do not graduate from high school, nor will English learners with learning disabilities have the lowest passing scores on high school exit exams as they currently do in California. Okay, and so one more definition just to make sure. And then what does it mean to be an equity leader? Because a lot of us school leaders, we like to describe ourselves as equity leaders. So we want to make sure that that we're reading the same, we're working off the same definition here. So this is from an article assessing equity leadership in schools and districts, and you could find this on AXA, which is the Association of School Administration website. Equity leaders engage the entire school community, especially those traditionally marginalized, to develop a vision for the success of every student. Through ongoing two-way conversations within the school community, they build their stakeholders' capacity to help enact a shared equity vision. Okay, yeah, that was a lot. So with that said, Lee, I mean, when I read those three definitions, like let's be real, like, do you think on average, like, school leaders or even us, like, we'll put ourselves out there, like, in our past, especially when we were baby administrators, our first few years, we definitely threw equity around, you feel me? Like the way that we describe things. But did we really unpack it and describe it in, I mean, did we really, you know what I'm saying? Did we really go over it with our staff to make sure that they understood it and we were all on the same page?
No, there was like a lot of assumptions going on because I think that we all felt that, we shared our like our non-negotiables, like our values as an admin team, and really made decisions around that, but we weren't very direct with how that meant equitable decisions or how it meant that we are seeking equity on our school site. Yeah, thanks, Carolyn. It is helpful to hear the definitions, and I think that oftentimes that we don't actually go into them when we are working towards a vision or working towards a mission or even starting a project, like defining what are the key terms that we're using. And I think, both Christine and I think about this when we're planning out presentations to anyone, any of the stakeholders, but even to families and communities when we're leading a school. It's like, how do we break down these definitions so that people are on the same page? And also don't feel like, I think it also helps them connect to the work because then they are in understanding because we broke down the definition and we said, like, this is what we mean, so that they're like, okay, I get it, as opposed to, I don't really understand, but I don't feel comfortable asking, so I'm just going to pretend like I know. And I think that's true for both parents, community members, but staff as well, new staff, when they come in. Like, if we don't break it down, if we don't revisit these terms and definitions, the working definitions that we are working off of, then we'll lose a lot of people. And a lot of the things that we're working towards kind of, they continue to spin, which is what we see, that they continue to spin or start over because we don't address these things in the beginning and often.
Yeah, for sure. So I see
Thanks for
here,
that.
Carolyn, She said, definitely helpful to hear the definitions. I'm not in education, but this is relevant to a lot of industries. Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And, Carolyn, not to put her business out there, but she is a mother of two. And, I know that, her girls are actually, one of them is probably about to start elementary school or is in elementary school. And so it's just one of those things, especially now since I have a baby and Elin has a baby. I know that when I start going school hunting, like this is like a priority to me. So schools, they like to use the word equity in their vision and mission statement, but I'm gonna be one of those parents that's gonna be like, so like, tell me more about that. Like, how so?
Yeah. Well, I think so. If we're thinking about tips or suggestions for school leaders, because that's who we work with, or anyone who puts themselves in a leadership position that's leading a team. Really, when you think about this, if you are working towards equity, to take the time as a team to unpack what equity means to each of you, and then to really like research the definition of equity that you all are going to be working under, and then communicate that to everybody in your organization and revisit it often. So that's a major takeaway from even just this Buzzword article. Because I mean, y'all can check out the Buzzword article. Some of those terms that we all use, and especially as school leaders, and like, well, like you said, Christina, like, what are we supposed to say? But I think it's important that we connect them to our value, our vision, and our mission. So let's move on to the second article that we're using, or that we are kind of connecting to this conversation around equity not being a buzzword, but also for our school leaders, that being an equity-driven school leader is more than just saying it. It's more than just like a label. So this one is, it was an article on the Association of Supervision and Curriculum Division, but it comes from a book called Street Data. So yeah, if you haven't checked that book out or heard about that book, again, for our educators out there, that's a super important one. It's both by Shane Saphir and Jamila Dugan, which the article is based off of the chapter, or one, parts of the chapter 2 that Jamila Dugan wrote. And it's titled Beware of Equity, Traps, and Tropes. And it was just fascinating because as I was reading through it, like there are 10 that she describes, and we're not going to get into all 10. We're going to pick 2 specifically. But when I was reading all 10, I connected to so many of them. And I was like going back and thinking about different experiences that I've had when I'm like, oh man, I know this person, I did this, or yes, that school did more of that, or, fed into more of these tropes. So it was fascinating. But the 2 that we're going to point out from the list of 10 is, the first one is structural equity. So this specifically goes into redesigning systems and structures, such as the master schedule, without investing in deeper personal, interpersonal, and cultural shifts. And when I think about that, because one, having the background of a school counselor and a school leader who was directly in charge of the master schedule, and mind you, there are a lot of different structural systems that we can break down, but a master schedule is one that we connect to. It is like, Christina and I talk about building a master schedule being equity focused. And it's not just, again, to say like, okay, we're renaming it this, so that must mean that we're being equity focused. No, it means that we actually have to ask those deeper questions. We have to look at all the different systems that feed into master scheduling. So that automatically made me think about, how do we collect student requests? What's the timeline of master scheduling? Are you allowing enough time to allow conversation conversation and transparency to the rest of your staff so that it's not hidden, because we know that anytime we rush anything, we skip through those very important reflective questions that help us check in on, are we being equitable? Are we thinking about our Black and Brown students? Are we thinking about our students with IEPs? Are we thinking about our students that are English language learners? So giving the time to really fully engage in those conversations and check through to make sure that we are reaching our students that need it the most. Support class placements, right? These are all part of the structural equity around master schedule, and breaking it down and saying, like, what are the things that feed into it? So transparency, the timeline, support class placement, AP class placement. I mean, what is the process for students to get into AP classes at the high school level? So that's when, that's a trope or a trap that Jamila Duggan explains in this article and in this chapter around, we can't just say that we're looking at structural equity within our structures. We really have to do the deeper personal work and
Yeah,
have
and
those
in terms
discussions
of the
based on deeper
master
questions.
schedule, like especially when we work with school sites and new administrators, or even veteran administrators who haven't really made a master schedule before, it's like they want to get straight into the work. As in, they want to go, they want to start building something on Aries and Synergy or whatever school data system you use. But we're just like, that's like the last 15, 20, you feel me, of the process. Like the good 75, 80, 85, that is like, that's where the real work happens. And it's like there's more to it. Like if we're talking about support classes, right? Like, okay, how many sections of reading support are we going to have? How many sections of math support or EL sections? So it's like, okay, how do we decipher like who qualifies for that? What data are we going to pull? What what hard numbers are we going to pull? But then not only is that's part of it, but then there's also the second part of like, okay, once they're in it, what is our plan for them to exit it? Because and so you need to have that discussion with your admin team too, because you're just like, okay, we have a goal, and like these kids better hopefully they do not stay in this support class for the entire school year, right? Or hopefully they're not lifers in EL. So like we need to make sure that we are flexible and that we are ready to make adjustments to the master's schedule, whether it's at the end of the semester versus just waiting till the end of the school year. So there's a lot of planning and a lot of discussion throughout the process. And it's not just like, okay, we're done. Like, okay, we rolled over the schedule, it's done. No, it's like it's ongoing. It's ongoing because you want to see if like what the needs are, because the needs are constant, and they're constantly in motion, because the students, I mean, it's based on the students at that time. Yeah, so the second one
Right.
is
Want to talk about the second
superficial equity. So this one is defined as failing to take time to build equity-centered knowledge and fluency, leading to behavioral shifts without understanding deeper meaning or historical context. So as soon as I read that, the first thing that I thought of, like, I thought of schools that have PBIS, restorative justice, school sites that say that they have RTI and MTSS in place, but mainly like PBIS and restorative justice. And so this reminds me of another time that I was a school site administrator, and I was supervising the PBIS team. And so one of the members, so for that particular school site, oh, I wish I brought the book down. I had the PBIS committee, which, by the way, for those of you not in education, PBIS is it's referring to the climate and culture. Think of it as the climate and culture committee. And so I had them read the book. We did a book talk on Linda Hammond, the implicit bias, a book on implicit bias and how it affects teachers and students in the overall climate and culture of a school. And so our entire climate and culture committee meetings, they were like 2-3 hours once a month, but that wasn't like, we didn't have a book talk the entire time, but then it always opened up our meetings. And so just to get us in that mindset and to like really understand what implicit bias is. And one of the members, one day she was just feeling really bold. And this was probably like our 5th meeting together. And she was like, honestly, Christina, I appreciate you. You know, I love the fact that you're very philosophical, and maybe it's because you have a doctorate degree. And I was like, okay. She was like, but I really feel like we're moving way too slowly here. Like, this whole philosophy thing is great, but I really think we could do without it. Like, I want to get to work. Let's open up the PBIS store. Let's print out the posters. Let's get the t-shirts. Let's throw she had an idea about us like doing a parent night PBIS, where she could call her hookups and we'll have taco trucks lining up the front of the school. And I was like, we are not doing that. I was like, because all of that is meaningless if we don't change our mindset. We're not doing this for fun and for us to do tangible things and for us to take cute pictures that we could post on our newsletter. I was like, this is a mindset. This is a mindset that is affecting our students, that is affecting our Black and brown students. So yes, this is an example of just like really like understanding that, you know, this is not, equity is not a program. It's not something that we check off the list. This is part of it's part of our daily practice. It's part of our habits. It's part of our mindset.
Exactly. I want to add to that too. It's like this idea of it's going too slow. It's also because there's this thought that like once we do something, we can like wash our hands of it and that's going to address the issue. And if we really step back and understand, like, if this is a daily practice, it isn't something that we can rush into. We have to ask those important questions. We have to have those courageous conversations. And we have to, as leaders, be able to hold that space and say, like, no, this is where we're headed, and connect it to why. Like, what is the vision behind PBIS? What are we trying to accomplish? So as an admin team, understanding, first of all, what that is for you, and then two, being able to communicate that to your committees or to your staff. So I think that's important. Oh, I see more people have joined. Does anyone in the chat just kind of want to add what you've experienced or witnessed, even with structural equity, superficial equity, or just even let us know where you're an educator or if you're an educator?
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
I think we're gonna shift gears a little bit, right? So let's kind of wrap this all up. And when we're talking about how this impacts our school leaders, or like why and how, I mean, obviously you all set the tone as school leaders. You're setting the tone at your school site. You're typically in charge of planning all of the meetings, being involved in the professional development either at the school site or at the district level. But you're also the communicator of what's important and what's of value at your school. And so when we think about equity, understanding that it's not a buzzword, being an equity driven leader means that you are about it, right? That you understand it, that you yourself have been taking the time to reflect and ask yourself the important questions about what does it mean to be equitable? What are the issues on our campus that impact our marginalized groups? And what are the things that we are doing to work towards closing those gaps, per se? How are we communicating that? When and how often, to who? All those important questions that you have to ask yourself constantly, daily, as a school leader, and really to take the time to define it. I think we got to stress that enough. So I don't know,
Yes.
Christina, you want to jump into
So,
just some of the things
school
that we
leaders,
see as
once
solutions to this?
again, make no assumptions. Do not assume that your staff, shoot, let alone your entire admin team, like make sure that everyone is on the same. Yes,
Right.
start there. Make sure everyone on the team is
Start
on the same
there.
page. Just make no assumptions. Define it. Define what equity means. Describe it. Describe it what, like, because I feel like sometimes we get stuck on like the overall general description of what equity means, but then it's like, all right, y'all, apply that definition and apply it to your school site. So what does equity look like specifically at your school site? So in other words, like, what is your ultimate
Mm-hmm.
goal? Like, which is your vision of what's the vision of your school? And what are the school initiatives, such as small learning communities, student pathways, wellness center? Like, how are those initiatives, each um, each initiative contributing, guiding, or leading to equity, or to educational equity, or to an equitable school system? Apply it as in the action steps. What are they? And assess it. What quantitative and qualitative data will you collect to measure your equity-based goals and initiatives? And y'all, if you need an example of what I mean about school sites or school districts defining it specifically to their sites and district, tap into Oakland Unified School District. And I'm not saying that because I currently work there, but I'm throwing them out there because I have worked at like 4 or 5 different school districts in the Bay. And I feel, and this is the only district that I've worked at that actually that actually defines it. So starting with for leaders, they have an OUSD focused leadership practices rubric, and they also have an Oakland effective teaching framework. So that's a framework for the teacher. So it defines what an equity school leader looks like in the focused leaderships rubric. And then it defines what an equity teacher looks like in the Oakland effective teaching framework. And not only does it define it, but it describes the expectations. And it's also a tool to help leaders and educators talk to, I'm not talk, sorry, I was reading Colin's thing. It helps them get to that, it helps them develop their skills and their craft to be more of an equitable educator. Both rubrics are used for evaluation and an observation tool, and also both rubrics for administrator and teacher, they're used as coaching and professional development tool as well. So definitely tap into that.
Yeah, because I mean that's a good starting point for maybe a district who doesn't have that and a school site that wants to have these conversations, specifically starting with your admin team. You could pull from that and see, unpack that together, reflect on it together, and start start there to see where you fall, or even what your common understanding of
So with
equity
that
or
said, y'all,
being
we're
an
going to
equity
close it
driven
up.
leader is.
Thank you for joining us. And, we just want to end it like this, like specifically to school leaders out there or to aspiring school leaders. If we strive to be equity leaders, start with your values and your vision and your vision statement. How is the journey to equity embedded in your school vision or even your personal values and educator vision and mission? What school initiatives are in place or need to be in place to bring the vision from paper to life? How and when and how often will you communicate, implement, and assess? And then, of course, circle back to your school initiatives to ensure an equitable school site. In other words, how will you make sure that equity is not just a buzzword, but a mindset and a cultural shift at your school site? And lastly, how often are you reflecting and assessing your personal daily practices?
Yeah, that's the key piece, is that individually as school leaders, like how often are you asking yourself these questions about the decisions you're making under your roles and responsibilities, the communication that you are engaging in with your staff, and even just the tone of your message. Like, what is it that you are conveying to everyone about your leadership? So reflecting on that often is key. And this is the type of work that Christina and we do. We love this. We are here to support school leaders on an equity driven, an equity focused leadership path. We are both coaches for school leaders, and our current clients consist of principals, assistant principals, and even counseling departments who want to focus their professional learning communities on equity and anti-racist practices, often, needing guidance and facilitation on how to build that within their departments. And so let us know if we can support you on your journey. Send us a DM.
Thanks,
We're here to build
y'all.
community.